Do you know how the city funds parks, police, fire, repairs potholes? You will hear the answers to those questions on this edition of City Hall in Focus. I'm Gloria Cohn. With me today are Jeff Maltbie, the city manager, and Al Savay, the director of community and economic development. Al, let me start with you. What does economic development mean?
Economic development for cities means it's a way for a city to promote and enhance a community's economic health and its quality of life. It's about expanding and retaining the businesses that we have, and also, I think most importantly, it's about getting the financial resources to pay for the services that we have, the parks and recreation, police and fire, and to rebuild our aging infrastructure that we've come to depend on in the City of Good Living. So that's economic development.
So you mentioned a little bit on why it's important. Jeff, could you expound a little bit more on that?
Sure, Gloria, I'd be happy to. Economic development is one of the critical pieces of how the City of San Carlos operates, and not just from a city government perspective, but from a community perspective. Folks need their jobs to be able to afford to live in our community, to pay for their homes, to pay for services that they have on a daily basis. We also have a need to pay for the services that we as a government provide them. And economic development is a big portion of that. If we look at what we're spending city dollars on, more than 50% of what we spend our money on is public safety related, police and fire.
Where do those revenues come from?
That's a great question, and I'll try to be brief in the answer because, as you might imagine, government finances are a really complex subject. We could have a whole interview just on that. Our largest revenue source is property tax. Everybody pays their own property tax. They're familiar with how that works. Sales tax is our next largest tax source. If you took all the property tax that's paid in San Carlos and all the sales tax that's paid in San Carlos, it would just about pay the cost of police and fire, but nothing else. Nothing towards parks, nothing towards other governmental services, running City Hall, that type of thing. And that surprises people quite a bit. And you have to imagine that not all of our property taxes are coming from a homeowner. Some are coming from commercial properties throughout the town. Quite a bit of our sales tax isn't coming from folks who live in San Carlos, but folks who live outside San Carlos.
Let me jump in and talk about property taxes. Out of all the property taxes collected, what portion of that comes to the city?
Okay, so what portion comes to the city? So every dollar you pay in property tax, because everybody pays a different amount, right? Every dollar you pay, the city gets 11 cents of that dollar. The rest of the money gets divided up amongst other governmental entities, the county, the school districts, the community college district, that kind of thing.
How does that 11% compare to the other cities in the county?
Well, to answer this question, we have to jump in our time machine a little bit and go back to the 1970s. I think most everybody is familiar with Prop 13, right? Prop 13 fixed your property tax rate at 1% and can grow just a very small amount per year, so that people don't get priced out of their homes based on escalating tax rates. So back when that law was enacted, prior to that, cities could set their own tax rates. But when that law went into effect, the merry-go-round stopped. So whatever tax rate you had at the time was the tax rate that your city would have forever. That 11 cents that we just talked about is not the same for every community. And San Carlos happened to, when the merry-go-round stopped back then, happened to be in about the bottom third of cities on the peninsula. So we get less sales tax than the average city in this, or less property tax rather than the average city in this county, which is one of the big differences between us and a city like, say, Foster City, which most people think of as being a very similar size city. It's just down the road, but very different property tax rate.
Jeff, you mentioned the sales tax. Where does that come from?
Geographically speaking, about 75% of the city's sales tax comes from the east side of town, the industrial area. Only about 11% comes from downtown, which surprises a lot of people because of all the activity and the vibrancy of downtown, but it's just not a big sales tax generator. In terms of the category, the types of businesses that are generating sales tax, the largest category in San Carlos is the building material industry, about 28%. So lots of lumber, lots of rock, lots of hardware moving around, and I think folks see a lot of those businesses around town. About 23% is sort of a generic business sector tax base that you see throughout town. And one of the sectors that's really growing quite a bit in San Carlos is the restaurant and especially the hotel tax. And that's because the 10% or so that hotels charge in terms of tax is not a tax that we have to share. Property tax and sales tax are taxes that we have to share with other governmental entities. But any of the hotel taxes that are paid in town stay right here to pay for city services, which is why hotels have always been very popular uses for cities.
Al, Jeff just mentioned the hotel sector as a fast-growing sector. Are you doing something to nurture that type of business?
Well, we certainly are. So what I'd like to do is that actually I have a few examples to show you. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Let's take a look at something. Okay, so the Landmark Hotel project is very unique, and it's one of the times that the city took a proactive perspective in economic development, and this is somewhat rare for cities to do. But the Landmark Hotel site, what's unique about that is the city purchased land that was really seen as somewhere strategically important to the city at a gateway location at the corner of Industrial and Hawley and next to the freeway. And so for many, many years, the city, for the last quarter century or so, the city wanted something to happen there, like a hotel or another regional draw type of business. And so what the city did is we used something that was called a Strategic Acquisition Reserve Fund. It was a fund that was set aside by our city council to invest in areas and properties and maybe development projects that would benefit the city over time. So a lot of people said, and this was a few years ago, so a lot of people said it couldn't be done and that there were some concerns about the hotel market, but city staff had been studying the hotel market very carefully. So what we did is we reached out to the hotel community and said, would you like to partner with the city of San Carlos? We got a lot of responses, and we partnered up with a group called R.D. Olson out of Orange County, and they really, really wanted to do something in Northern California. They were a great builder and owner of hotels. So this Landmark Hotel will be a Marriott Residence Inn, a really nice product for the city of San Carlos. It'll be 204 rooms. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, the transit occupancy tax is very significant for cities. Cities love hotels. The hotel's also great for the local community because it serves the citizens of the community. You can have your family stay there. It also serves the local businesses. And in terms of a return on the city's investment, that's something that's very important to the city in terms of, hey, if we're going to get into the market, if we're going to be proactive about economic development, we have to have a very good or reasonable return on our investment. This one really is a home run. It's about almost a 40% return on the initial investment that the city made for the next 20 years. Let's move on to another project.
And that's Wheeler Plaza,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and we've talked, Gloria, you and I have talked about Wheeler Plaza in the past, and that's another public-private partnership. So many years ago, the city decided that, hey, we have these pieces of property in the downtown, we have a parking lot in the downtown. There was a citizens advisory committee that got together and said, hey, the city should do something with this. We need a little more parking. Maybe a mixed-use development would be good. As city staff began to study it and working with the city council, the city began to acquire and assemble different properties to make it a reasonable construction site. So what we have is the Wheeler Plaza development project, which will begin construction later this year. And the partnership resulted in 109 for-sale condominiums, which is great because a lot of people in our community live in homes. They're downsizing, the kids are moving out. I've talked to so many San Carlos residents that want to move where the action is and be in the downtown and go to the restaurants and things like that. So this project, from just a community amenity standpoint, is great to begin with. Also, we knew that we needed more parking in the downtown. So we look at economic development not only in financial terms, but also in terms of community benefit. And that's also a very key component to economic development. And so one of the other key issues here was we needed parking. We got a brand new parking garage, 250 plus new spaces, which is much more than we have there now. Also, we'll get about $3.7 million in below market rate fees that we can then take and invest in affordable housing, which is actually one of the priorities for economic development in the city of San Carlos. And so those are all some of the key components of that project. I'd like to talk about one more project.
And that's called Meridian Plaza?
It's called Meridian 25. And so the Meridian 25 development is really one of the biggest and first Class A office development and campuses in the city of San Carlos.
And can you explain briefly what Class A means?
Class A is the top of the line office space. It's executive, it's high tech, it's knowledge-based business. It's the best kind of office building that you can have in the marketplace. And so where it is, it's at the corner of Branston and Industrial. It's on about 8 acres of property right next to the freeway. And a developer based in the local area wants to build about 530,000 square feet, just over 500,000 square feet of this Class A office space in our community. This has been through public review, it's been through the Planning Commission. And in terms of economic impact of this project, one of the big impacts, as Jeff mentioned earlier, is property taxes. So with an office building, of course, we don't get sales tax, we get property taxes. Now, a big new office building such as this will generate more than $500,000 a year in general fund money. That means the kind of money that the city council can put toward parks and recreation or police and fire. Some of the other benefits are community benefits, as I said, and what we try to do is work with developers and development projects to make sure that there's reinvestment in the community. One of the issues that we have is we have aging infrastructure. And as we see a transition from some of the older businesses that are starting to kind of stop or leave town, we are going to see, and we're trying to attract more knowledge-based businesses into our community. And we're seeing this all up and down the peninsula. But one of the key things there is, well, we have this aging infrastructure. We have a lot of old roads and mobility is very important. The people talk about the first and last mile. It's about connecting the disconnected, connecting the workers to mass transit, connecting the mass transit, when you get there, to your office building. How can we do that better? With this particular project, we are getting almost $4 million of reinvestment and actual building of sidewalks and installation of bike lanes and making it safer for people to get to and from work. So those are some of the key issues with that major project. So those are some really interesting economic development projects in our city.
As well as wonderful amenities that go along with it. Jeff, you talked about property taxes, you talked about sales taxes. Is there any other source of revenue that comes to the city?
There are lots of revenues that come to the city, smaller revenues, fees that are paid for services, building inspection services, development impact fees, those kinds of things that come to the city. Some of the economic development we do in San Carlos also generates fees for the school district as well.
How do you stay prepared for the future?
That's a great question. Well, we have a great planning department. We have a council, city council, that really focuses on doing long-term planning and strategic planning so that we do stay ahead of the curve. Economic development is something that's been very important and critical, really, in the development of the city for decades. Everybody remembers the slogan that San Carlos is the city of good living. But if you take a look at our city seal, it has industry and homes. There's a balance. This community was created with that balance, and it's our job at City Hall that we take very seriously in continuing that balance. Everybody fears change. We understand that change is hard, But the community needs to change. The system that we have set up here in the United States requires change, requires growth over time. It's our job to make sure that that transition takes place over a reasonable amount of time, and that the scale in which development and change is happening is reasonable to the city of San Carlos. We happen to be going through a really intense development spurt right now, where the economy is red hot and properties are changing hands and people want to do new things with the properties that they've bought. And we're working every day here at City Hall with those folks to make sure that the types of developments that ultimately get built in town fit for this community, not only in terms of financial fit for the community and paying for those services, but also the look and feel and the quality of life of here in San Carlos.
And Al, do you want to expound on that and add some specifics?
Yeah, I think that we don't do this thing in a vacuum. What I mean by that is every good city should have a plan, and we should do economic development in a thoughtful way, and that's what's happened in the city of San Carlos. We have a group called the Economic Development Advisory Commission or EDAC, EDAC.
Who's on that?
Well, it's a group of people that represents a broad range of folks in our community, people from the chamber, business owners, property owners, realtors. So it's a wide-ranging knowledge base that is appointed by our city council, in that advises our city council on economic development issues. And they put together a plan this last year that was accepted by the city council. And it really looks at the priorities moving forward and what actions can we take in terms of economic development moving forward.
Financial health is so important to every city, and it sounds like that San Carlos is in great shape. Thank you, Al. Thank you, Jeff, for joining me today. If you would like more information, you can visit San Carlos's website. This is City Hall in Focus. I'm Gloria Cohn.